Hi, welcome to the Modern Human Podcast with your host, Wendy.
And Brenda. Hi.
Hi, everyone. We're so excited to be back on the horse, metaphorically speaking. Summer is always a really busy time for us with children and stuff. And we've been enjoying ourselves, kind of regrouping. And I feel like that's also a very big thing for a lot of people that we know, is kind of regrouping, coming back to center and figuring out and making sure all of the actions that we're doing have an authenticity to them. And that sometimes means taking a break. And that's what we had to do. But we're back at it. We have some things to share.
Yes, we do. So we're going to be talking about this channeled painting that Wendy brought through last month. And obviously we know that time doesn't work the way that our brains think it does. And even though we've just now entered August 1st, the energies of this are still overlapping. And so I really want to just honor the journey that we're being guided into, which is all about acting, being, feeling in alignment with your vulnerable, authentic self. And that's not a conversation I think we can have in one podcast. So I'm sure this is going to be a theme for the rest of the year, because as you can see in this painting, there is so much magic here, so much power, so much, what's the word I want? Greatness, really, from source. You can feel it, you can see it. And the key that unlocks all of this magic and this power is really the alignment of self. And what that really means, because we throw a lot of language, a lot of words, a lot of schooling around that, right? Like everything has really been about the obedience of being healthy, being wise, being, what's some other words for it?
Being in alignment, being balanced.
Right.
Connected.
And in some cases, we can bypass ourselves unintentionally. And so the mastery of self, of like being still, right? You can say that I'm doing a meditation and I'm going within, and all of those things are really good things. And the practice of self every moment of every day. So it's kind of like taking some of those nuanced things and bringing it to every moment. And what does that mean for you?
Yeah, and I feel like what you're talking about is, creating the sacred temple within, something that Brenda and I talk about a lot. And how do you create that sacred temple within? And there's a lot of beautiful spiritual teachers out there that if you do this, if you create that stillness, if you create a meditative practice, if you create a behavior and habit of connecting to these other dimensions, really we're talking about connecting to other dimensions, you will connect to other dimensions, right? I mean, that's what this is. How do you do that? And that's what Brenda is saying about kind of spiritual bypassing, is like kind of stepping into those dimensions and not necessarily honoring what might be arising.
And I want to be mindful about honoring that it's not really about going outside of the self. It is about integrating more with those dimensions in the self. So said another way, you're bringing your higher self into every cell of your body. So any dense like karmas or traumas or patterns that do not align with who you really are really being shoved in your face. And that's probably the nicest way I can put it. And if you have any doubts of what that might be for you, you could notice where your triggers are. You could notice where you're getting upset or overwhelmed. That is a perfect, beautiful opportunity for you to look at parts of yourself, inside of yourself. So we're not going outside, and that's easy to say. And what does that mean in practice? The being space of going within to that multi-dimensional space, that higher frequency of function. It is not outside. And I think that that's one of the things that frustrates me a little bit, because the way that it's written out or it's spoken of is almost like this is something outside of us, and nothing, that pathway won't work to help us. It really is within. It really is inside of some of that guilt or that shame or that uncertainty or that anger or resentment. This is the way that we're being drawn in. And while I honor that it doesn't always feel good to be in those spaces, definitely, it's so important that we start showing up more for those spaces.
What do you mean by, having some of those, emotions draw you in?
I mean, for me, this is really about if you can show up for a meditation or a good experience, like you have a very open heart and an open mind, right? So in the same way, showing up for that fear or doubt in that same open heart and open mind and unraveling you, the mastery of you. Does that make sense?
I mean, I feel like there's a lot of steps missing in there. Like, you're saying that as things are arising, right, like you trigger, like you were saying.
And maybe partly what I'm saying too is it's time to notice, period. It's time to just show up and like, how do you really feel about everything? What do you really think about all of these things? Like, sit down and take notice of your thoughts. Because when we meet thoughts that we don't know that we have, they're controlling or creating our reality for us. And I love this painting for that reason, because it reminds you that everything is working out perfectly. So you can't miss it. You cannot get it wrong. And you may have thoughts in your thinking self that think in lack, let's say, if you're experiencing lack in your world. And what does that really mean or look like or feel like when we show up for that? Because I sometimes will meet parts of me that I'll say it like this. I'll meet parts of me that are really small, and I don't realize that I have them because most of me feels very healthy about it or loving about it. And yet there's this other smaller part that's like, I hate this. And I'm like, let's talk about that, right? Let's open heart, open mind, be curious, and unravel. And you're right, there's a lot of different steps in that, but those steps are unique and special for each and every one of us. And I feel like that's why we do the classes that we do and the retreats, to help people dive deep into those things.
I feel like what you're bringing up is really important because, like we were saying in the very beginning, just talking about how there's a lot of people that talk about the practice of going within and connecting to these multidimensional spaces, because we are multidimensional beings. And it's so fun to tap into those worlds if you've done it. It's exciting. And honestly, you really begin to expand and really get to know who you are when you're not here or not in physical form. And I feel like, what they don't really talk about is, are those parts that you're talking about, which is, hey, it's so great to be in this oneness or in this
to almost visit those
connection.
spaces, right? We're like visiting the 5D or visiting the 12D, right? We can have moments where we go in there and we're like, this is like so great. And yet for me and everything that we've been getting over and over is that, no, it's within. It's bringing that into within. And the first thing that's going to happen when you visit 12D and you're like, yes, I accept that in every cell, you're going to meet up with all of those parts that are not in 12D or 6D. I don't know that it's possible to go right to 12D. It could be. And yet I wonder if that takes the discipline and the practice that we're really being guided to shift into right now. And I do feel that there are many of us out here who have been doing this for lifetimes. So this is not one try. This is not one horse ride. This is millions and billions of them.
Right, and we're cultivating a mastery of it. And, Joe Dispenza obviously talks about this, and he talks about kind of moving, lower dense emotions that we hold in our lower chakras, right? Yeah. And moving them up into our higher chakras, which is through his breathing technique. So I'm sure if you haven't, you gotta check it out. It's kind of cool. But you're almost talking about, how do you actually process those emotions? And definitely the breathing techniques work. I've used them. They definitely help. But there is this psychological aspect of it that is necessary. It's almost like, the physical body moving the emotions is so important, because even tapping into these realities, these higher realities, even for 5 minutes, does shift your cells and can shift you dramatically into health, into, kind of triggering your body back into health, remembering what it is like it's like to feel abundance, or because you've been sitting in lack, and it's nice to feel what abundance actually feels like. And doing those practices can help you remember what abundance is. And I feel like you're talking about the psychological process of sitting with yourself. If there are triggers, because you, even being in those heightened ways, it felt like I come back and say, hey, I really felt abundant. If I'm not processing some of those psychological, like thoughts and other things like that, that's what you're talking about, right? Like, how do we actually release some of those, the habits, the mental habits, or...
And I definitely think it can be in that mental space, and it also could simply be a dense frequency in your physical body. So then your back starts hurting and you're like, what the heck is that? And it's like owning that I may have a thought that thinks I'm not supported, and I need to own that, whether you know what that thought is or not, and then shifting yourself intentfully. And intention, it is everything here. It truly is absolutely everything. And we don't need to understand as much as I think we do. Okay? Because it is what it is. And I feel that if we can let go of figuring it out more and simply show up with intention more, I personally feel that we would get there a heck of a lot faster. And so when I say practice, when I say integrate with those higher things, it could be a thinking thing where you show up like with a thought. Absolutely. And it could be a trauma. It could be a part of you saying, listen, I never felt hurt or seen. I need you. I need you to just sit with me. And let me tell you, in walking this walk, for me personally, I have met a lot of my parts that have been hurt and abused, that have needed me to sit down with them. And these parts, they do not like me, and they are not comfortable to sit in. And to stay in an open heart and an open mind with them and say, hey, come on in. That's been my journey with it. And I know that everyone out there is having their own unique experience with it. It's different. And yet it is some version of all of these masteries that we do know. And they're unique and special for all of us. I don't know. Did I get off on a tangent? Answer your question of like just integrating with the energies.
I feel like what you're talking about is like, on a human level, you know, you're talking about really showing up for these emotional parts of your being, like, especially if you've experienced, you know, immense trauma or emotional abuse or neglect or physical abuse, sexual abuse, you know, people that have experienced trauma, real, like, dense trauma, like,
yeah,
you know.
Like all of us here. Yeah.
All of us here.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I have, but, like really walking through the human part of that, because I feel like in a lot of ways it's not really ever addressed, you know, and I feel like that's why it's such an important conversation. You know, I feel like you're talking about almost like really being present. So, you know, this is the practice of mastering the self. And we do think that means tapping into other higher realms and remembering that connectedness that I mentioned earlier, and remembering and feeling, you know, your higher self and all those things. But I feel like when we start experiencing those things, because those are undoubtedly will happen, we think we're doing something wrong. And then we think that we actually have to meditate more, or because what we're trying to do is always be in that unified space and connect to the unified field and just feel this love and manifest, you know, abundance. And, you know, if I'm not manifesting abundance, I must be doing something wrong. And, you know, all of these things, or whatever your thing is. And I feel like that's what you're talking about, because it moves us into, we think we're doing something wrong, when in fact you're talking about that's a natural part of the process, right?
In fact, it's truly a gift of the perfection, the magic of this reality that we are in to meet and reconcile and like connect with all of our parts instead of pushing away and being separate from. We integrate with, and that includes our higher self, and allowing more and more of who we really are in this lightness of this frequency of being. It's very light. And I feel more and more with this 5D opening and being here, the new earth, that for some of us, we're almost having more experiences where it feels ick or heavy,
uncomfortable.
Yes, because you're really feeling and seeing, and that's the magic of this right now. So really embracing that and opening your being to loving that. I mean, truly, you love whatever arises. And I think that was Matt Kahn. I want to give him credit for that. And I love him for that. I love him for all of those rememberings of loving unconditionally all that you are. It automatically, if it's pure and true, it eases your whole being into acceptance. Resistance to change is natural and normal. And that is a part of what I'm talking about, and I haven't named it yet, and I'm going to name it now. That resistance of that fear or that doubt, that resistance because I'm really mad about it. Those are the things that I'm inviting you to take responsibility for, because that is always the place of power. The place of power isn't about fixing the problem. It's about saying, hey, this is a thing for me. I don't like it. I do like it. I feel afraid here. That's always the place of power. You can feel into that, own that. Automatically, all of this is coming into alignment. You. And that's really what you're looking for. And it's not about not being angry or not being afraid. And a lot of people are teaching this, and I love them all for it. And having the grace and the compassion for yourself to not try to be like someone else and just be your version of this. And those are words that could never really come into experience of the greatness of you. It is so many moving parts. It is so many loving nuances, even the ugly parts.
I feel like what needs to be stated here is like you're really talking about, instead of this embodiment or this mastery of self isn't necessarily when you're in meditation and in that safe corner in your house or even in your bed, wherever you do your stuff, right? Your meditations or
really
sanctuary.
Like hiding in the cave, right? We're not in caves, we're not on islands, we're integrating, we're practicing.
Right. And you're saying that the mastery of self is practicing this awareness, becoming present, being you said silence, right?
The stillness.
The stillness. And the mastery of like really showing up for whatever is arising for you in the moment. And that is self-mastery, and knowing that it's all happening for your highest and greatest good, and kind of shifting your relationship with those parts that might be coming up. Like that in itself is this in a different form. It's almost like a moving self kind of mastery, right?
Yeah. And moving into the other parts of the painting, being still in that, loving yourself in that unconditionally, without judgment, without criticism, without competition or comparison, then allows for the help that is here, the assistance, the magic, the miracles. Every time we connect and go within, we are reminded of all of this magic, all of this help. You are allowed to receive it. And you must be the one to give yourself that permission. You are the only one who can say it won't be outside of you. It will only be within. And the discomfort in that humanness with all of those thoughts. And I feel like that's partly why you brought up about your psyche, is that there really is so much programming here that we have to start owning. We've gone along with thoughts that don't align with who we really are, so many of us. And we don't really think about it. We just go along. We just, I don't even know, I'm trying to, like schools, we just go along in so many ways with our families, with the culture. And it's time to just show up. Notice how you feel. Notice what you think. It's okay if you don't like it. We just need to start having the conversation. It's okay if you do like it too.
Yeah, it's true.
We just need to start having the conversation.
And the more and more you start really kind of showing up and creating this self-discipline of becoming aware of how you feel, because you matter, that is in actuality loving the self. we never really talked about this before, but it really does shift your energy field, because in that way you're being authentic and you're not being obedient, because spirit and the universe is not wanting you to be, obedient, because you were talking about that earlier before we started this conversation. Obedience is not going to take you there. Then meditating and kind of bypassing what's arising with you, and then thinking there's something wrong when something is arising, like anger or sadness or depression, whatever's arising for you.
And we are being guided to be in a practice of doing it, though. So like, that's where it's not one thing, right? It's not like don't do anything or do everything. It's like it needs to be authentic and real. If it feels right to be still for 5 minutes every day and that brings you back to it, well, then do that. But you're the only one who can say jumped in.
We'll finish.
No, it has to be authentic. It has to be real for your journey. It's not about it being someone else's idea or concept.
Right. I feel like that's what's hard, because at first you do need other people to kind of guide you to get you on the path, right? Or get you to kind of like, well, how do I do that? Or how do I connect with it? And you might learn some meditation techniques or whatever, but it doesn't really account for you really figuring out your own, and I talked about this yesterday, your own unique language with spirit. I mean, you're going to have your own unique, and the only way to figure out what that is for you to actually fumble your way through talking to God or having a prayer or whatever that might look like with you, and then become second nature. But I feel like, you wanted to talk about resistance, and I feel like that's such a hard word. It actually triggers me, because it implies a lot of negative things. And so I never really liked that word. For you, I feel like it's a little bit more digestible.
Yeah.
Like it's not a big, you're like, all right. But resistance to me is just like I'm fighting up against something. And I probably am. I'm even fighting up against the word resistance. I probably have a lot of resistance.
You're allowed to not like it, right?
So I guess talk more about that, what that actually looks like on like a day-to-day, like if you are, what even resistance is, I guess, because it does have a negative connotation to it. Like, I don't know. To me, it is.
Right. And that's really important. And so I love that, having that good conversation about it. For me, it's simply meeting up with the part of you that doesn't agree with the whole of you. So if you were to show up and notice all of your parts and love them and hear what they have to say and see them, you will meet up with parts that say, you know what, I don't want to do it like that because so-and-so said this to me once and I hate myself, or whatever. I'm trying to think of something real.
You're saying so you're basically saying any shadow part.
It can be a shadow part.
Know that you're loved or something.
Right. Yeah. Sorry. And so it can be that. It can also be just a part of you that believes you're supposed to work hard to make money. So here's one of mine that I'm getting better at every day. It is so ingrained in me. And when I reach in and I feel into the field, I meet up with then the energies of all the millions of people who think that you have to work hard to make money. And it reinforces me to say, yeah, you do. You have to really work hard. And I'm like, okay, Brenda, that totally makes sense. I love you so much. And I'm in charge now. And we are allowed to be in balance all the time. And we are allowed to work in a way that feels good and is comfortable for giving and receiving. So I'm getting better at that right now.
And so your resistance is
you have to work hard to make money.
So how does that resistance show up?
I mean, it shows up for me in that I tend to overbook myself without even being aware of it. And my boundaries are crossed because I have learned from whatever, it doesn't even matter, really, this is just mine now, that I have to work like that, right? And so when I break bread with that, when I understand what that part of me is saying, it does come down to worthiness, me feeling good about myself. It does come down to the nuances of our world that says that you have to do it like that,
So like in a simplified way, would you say that it's just like two competing belief systems, like a thought?
That's exactly what I would say.
Okay, so it's like two competing belief systems. And then you like one that thinks that you need to work hard, and then one that thinks like, no, we can manifest and create whatever reality we want.
I'm very powerful, right?
And so then how do you reconcile them?
They become really good friends, and we sit down a lot and we get to know each other a lot. And I eventually when it feels safe and comfortable for all of my parts. So when the part of me that is afraid and maybe wants to hold on to the working hard piece, I basically say, okay, and we're done. I set a boundary within my own being to say, I'm done. And then when that part of me wants to come up and be like, okay, listen, I really think that we should give more and give more and give more. And I say, listen, that totally makes sense. No. Won't even have the conversation. Done. And then what happens is that part of me will chime in again. Hey, I totally get it. You said this thing, you said no, but I'm just wondering because it's always been like that, da, 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 da. And I say no again, as many times as I need to create what? The new habit, the new way of being. And that is what's being called in right now for all of us. What is your daily moment practice? And I truly do mean every moment of every day. What are you doing? And I like saying you be as loving as you can in every given moment and watch what happens in your whole world. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, that is helpful. I kind of want to just back up a little bit and ask about, how do you, when you have two opposing thoughts or beliefs within your two opposing beings within you, I like to say the parts of myself, so they're different, and I even give them names, but when you're saying, you have part of Brenda that likes to work hard, likes to work hard, likes the identity around working hard, even likes how it feels because there's so much comfort in that old identity. And then you have the downsides of it, which is exhaustion, overbooking, no personal space, whatever. And then you have this other part of you that's trying to create this other good habit of no, we can create money or whatever, but in something that hasn't even been created yet. So you don't even know. In some ways you're kind of experiencing things in some kind of alternate reality. How do you reconcile the feeling part? Because it does feel good to work hard, that part of your ego or whatever. You get what I'm saying? And then how do you convince that part of your ego that likes it? And this could be said for even a bad relationship. So there's parts of it that feel really good or whatever. You know what I mean? How do you reconcile? I mean, that's probably a really big question, but.
Well, I love the conversation. This is awesome. And really breaking bread with, I don't convince that part of me. I invite that part of me to consider that maybe we don't have to work hard, slowly and comfortably. Because I feel for me that thought was created from abuse and trauma. And that's okay. It is what it is. It's no big deal. And it can be okay, because it is. Because I've created a safe place within my being that all of my being can show up. And I can sit down and my being, I can trust me to say, okay, you know what? You don't have to. But I'm going to invite you to consider that we don't have to work on Fridays. What do you think about that? And so that part of me might say, you know what, listen, I don't know. You've been sitting with me, talking to me a lot about this not working as much. I'm kind of really scared. But I think maybe I can. Because you get to this point when you see, hear, validate, and love yourself enough. This is what parenting yourself is. Then your being goes, all right, fine. I'm scared. I'm so scared. And you're like, oh my gosh, I know totally. I get it. This is scary stuff. Let's try. Let's see what happens. And then we try and we show up. And that part of me might have experiences of doubt throughout the whole Friday off, let's say. And parts of me are going, oh, I'm so excited. This is so great. I'm not doing anything. And other parts are going, okay, I have to do something. What should I do? I should probably work. I'm going to do something. I'm going to write. I'm going to make a thing. I'm going to go, whatever. And practicing that being still is that, but it depends on you. What is your thing? For me, I like loving my emotions. And it's the thoughts that take a little bit more practice. It's changing those thoughts and saying, I am allowed to be at peace. I'm allowed to know my value is not my work. I start with that allowance. And then I move into, my value is this. My value is my heart. So, right?
There's a lot of moving pieces, right? To you working hard and so you're saying it's almost creating a new identity, really, which is multifaceted and complex, truly.
1000%, yes. Did you? I can jump in?
No, I really just wanted to kind of see in a practical way, because I feel like that's the piece that people really don't know what healthy looks like. And it's like, obviously, you've taught me a lot of different things, with your therapy background, of just what that looks like and having a healthy relationship with yourself and how do you cultivate that. And that's ultimately what this is. And it is, mastering your thoughts and, increasing your vibration. It is doing all of those things too, but in a more psychological way. What does that really mean? Because I feel like in some ways there is this, there's this space between language of saying, okay, yeah, I want to embody 5D and I want to be enlightened and all these things, but I have these other parts that are, having these really kind of uncomfortable experiences and don't want to be enlightened and don't want, those.
Or aren't ready to, and that would really be the conversation I'm having, is that we're meeting parts of us that aren't ready yet. And then what does that mean? Usually if we're not ready, it's because we don't feel safe. And so then parts of me I need to love them for them to feel safe, to then let go of their grip on my being. And that's okay. And I want to bring through that we've all being, again, with this huge shift taking place, we are being confronted with our ancestral wounds and karmas. That's part of it. And so having these conversations about what is yours, what is not, and if you're experiencing it on whatever level, it's yours. So stop putting it outside of you and start going within. And I say that with so much love and kindness, because I get it. It's not easy. It tends to be simple stuff, and it's not always easy.
Right, and that means, like in a really human way, meaning if you are you have a lot of anger, or if and you're like, yeah, that's because I remember when I was Native American and I was slaughtered, and then I remember this other life where, you have all of these like past life experience or remembrance, because when we say everyone's awareness is expanding, it does include all of these experiences, right? And we don't talk enough about that. It sounds like a whole nother podcast episode. And those aren't always good memories or good awarenesses, good, whatever. But if it is coming up for you, instead of saying, yeah, that happened, 1600, of just being like, hey, you don't even need to really know about that. You can just, like you said, go within and honor your own anger. And by you honoring your own anger and really flushing out the betrayal and loving yourself through that, or loving yourself through those, like just allowing yourself to have that voice, because we probably didn't have a voice back then of even saying that sucked, and even somebody validating it, to being like, yeah, that makes sense. So really just sitting and allowing yourself to have those experiences is the love that it needs, truly, right? And that's kind of what you mean, right? Like, so it doesn't even miss, but then your own anger eases and you're like, and you can see that whole situation, or maybe you don't even remember that situation anymore because it's no longer needed to be in your awareness as something to love.
So I feel like, to wrap it up, this podcast is really a reminder of how well you're doing, how perfect you already are. You being you and showing up and trying every day is enough. It's enough. There is so much more going on all around us and within us. And partly, can you ease up and love yourself through that? Can you let go a little bit more to just surrender into this wholeness that is already you, even when we're in that discomfort and that pain? It's working out perfectly.
And then as you're showing up for yourself in that way, you are naturally opening your chakras. You are naturally becoming more aligned. You're naturally removing density from your body and from your thoughts. So you don't have to work so hard at it. You're just naturally expanding if you just really showed up in the moment and in that stillness, did you say? Yeah, the stillness, and just cultivating that awareness, self-awareness, and loving the self. Then all of those other things are going to happen naturally. So you're doing an amazing job. We're in this together.
Yes.
The energy's been intense. So sending so much love to you.
So much love. Thank you so much for listening and for being you. I love you.
And until next time.